Kamavacara Ahetuka Citta. Today is January 24, 1998. Last week, we talked about unwholesome consciousness. Today, we'll talk about Ahetuka Citta. Hichu means root, and Ahechu means rootless. Citta means consciousness. We have 18 types of rootless consciousness. How many roots are there? There are 6. For unwholesome consciousness, there are 3 roots: lobha, dosa, and moha. In English, we call them attachment, ill will, and delusion. For wholesome consciousness, on the other hand, there are also 3 roots: non-attachment, goodwill, and wisdom. Ahetuka Citta means no roots, it is rootless consciousness. Akusala Vipaka Citta. Among the 18 Ahetuka Citta, there are 3 groups. One group is Akusala, unwholesome, Vipaka, result, Citta. Within this group of what we call unwholesome resultant consciousness, we have 7 types. Before we learn about the 7 Akusala Vipaka Citta, we have to understand what kusala and akusala mean. Why do we call them that? The characteristic of akusala is, with fault, and it produces painful, or undesirable, results or effects. We call this akusala. In short, whatever is connected with the 3 roots of evil, attachment, ill will, delusion, is akusala. So, akusala vipaka citta is the result of unwholesome consciousness. Here are the 7 types. 1. Upeka sahagata kakuvinyana, or I consciousness accompanied by indifference. 2. Upeka sahagata sotavinyana, or ear consciousness accompanied by indifference. 3. Upeka sahagata ganavinyana, or nose consciousness accompanied by indifference. 4. Upeka sahagata jivavinyana, or tongue consciousness accompanied by indifference. 5. Dukkha sahagata kayavinyana, or body consciousness accompanied by pain. 6. Upeka sahagata sampadachana, or receiving, or accepting, consciousness accompanied by indifference. 7. Upeka sahagata santirana, or investigating consciousness accompanied by indifference. So for unwholesome resultant consciousness, we have these 7 types. For the first type, upeka sahagata kakuvinyana, or I consciousness accompanied by indifference, we see, i.e., I consciousness arises, an undesirable object as a result of previous unwholesome consciousness. We have 2 kinds of I consciousness. The first is unwholesome resultant consciousness, and the second is rootless wholesome resultant consciousness. Although they're both called I consciousness, the difference depends on the object. When you see something, maybe a picture, or some other form, I consciousness arises. I consciousness is accompanied by indifference, but in the context of unwholesome resultant consciousness, I consciousness that is the result of unwholesome consciousness will see an undesirable object. You will see something or someone you don't like. Even if you don't want to see it, you still have to. This is the result of your unwholesomeness in the past. This I consciousness arises as an effect. It's like if you don't get along with someone but have no choice but to be with that person every day. This is one kind of result of unwholesome consciousness that we've had in a previous life. This is according to the Buddhist philosophy of Abhidhamma. Don't blame anyone, instead, blame your karma. With the second type, upeka sahagata sotavinyana, or ear consciousness accompanied by indifference, sometimes you don't want to hear a sound, a voice, or some other noise, but you have to. Our neighbors might fight all the time and make disturbing noises, but we have to stay there and hear it. This is the result of unwholesome consciousness in a previous life. And so now we have to hear undesirable things. It's the same with the third type, upeka sahagata ganavinyana, or nose consciousness accompanied by indifference. Maybe we have to work in a place with a bad smell, or stay somewhere with bad, dirty air. We can't get away from it. This is also the result of unwholesome consciousness. What about the fourth type, upeka sahagata jivavinyana, or tongue consciousness accompanied by indifference? Even if you're rich and have plenty of money to buy the foods you enjoy, maybe your doctor will tell you that you can't eat them anymore because they're bad for your health. Instead, the doctor may tell you that you have to eat things that you don't like the flavor of. You might be forced to consume drink, food or medicine that tastes terrible because our health requires it. And so this type of tongue consciousness arises. As for the fifth type, dukkha sahagata kayavinyana, or body consciousness accompanied by pain, we sometimes have to experience physical pain. Maybe someone hits you or bites you, and then you feel bodily pain. In that moment, dukkha sahagata kayavinyana arises. Why do you have pain or accidents? As results of unwholesome consciousness in a previous life. I remind you to not blame anyone. Don't say, it's because of him, or, it's because of her, that you had some painful experience. It's not because of anyone, rather, it's because of your previous karma. You have to feel physical pain. Physical pain is one kind of feeling. We'll be talking later about the 5 kinds of feeling. This is one of them, and it regards bodily pain. The 6th type is Upeka Sahagata Sampadachana, or receiving, or accepting, consciousness accompanied by indifference. We'll be talking more about this one in the next one later, but for now, it's sufficient to know that when an object appears to our eye sensitivity, as an example, a thought process arises. It's the same when we hear, smell, taste or touch something. We'll also be talking later about the kinds of thought processes that arise when different things happen. When we sleep, what kind of thought process is there? What about when we dream? Or when we gain enlightenment? We'll be talking about all of these later. Here, receiving consciousness receives the object when it appears to the 5 senses. This receiving consciousness is accompanied by indifference. The 7th type is Upeka Sahagata Santirana, or investigating consciousness accompanied by indifference. When an object appears to the 5 sense doors, the investigating consciousness has to investigate whether the object is good or not. All types of consciousness have their function. What's their feeling, their root, their function, their object, their base? We'll be talking more about all of this. For now, I'd like you to know that these are the 7 types of unwholesome resultant consciousness. When you see, hear, smell, taste, or touch something that you don't like, these types of consciousness arise. When we practice meditation, we will see anicca, which means impermanence, dukkha, which means suffering, dissolution, or painful, and anatta, which means selflessness, no soul, no self, no entity, or uncontrollable. If we translate anatta as no soul, as is commonly done, it's very hard to understand. But if we understand Abhidhamma, we understand right away. We know what no soul means. Why did the Buddha teach anatta? In the time of the Buddha, there were people who believed that when we see something, a soul appears in our eye and sees the object. Who sees it? Soul, they would say. Who hears something? This powerful soul inside of our body. They believed that this soul can see, hear, smell, taste and feel. And they believed that this soul is eternal, it lasts forever. These people also said that when we die, it is only the body that dies, the soul doesn't die. At bodily death, the soul comes out from the body and takes another body. But the Buddha said no soul, rather, it is eye consciousness that sees, there is no person. Although we may say or think that, I see with my eyes, the eye itself can't see anything. The eye is just a material property, incapable of seeing anything. So who sees? Eye consciousness. When we see something, we can't say that eye consciousness is a man or a woman, right? When you practice meditation and gain enlightenment, you'll understand all of this. This is reality. It's just eye consciousness that sees. When we hear, it's not a man or a woman or a person that hears. Who hears? Ear consciousness. Who smells? Nose consciousness. There's no entity, no body, no person here. We're talking about realities. Consciousness is one kind of reality, right? And there are also mental factors, material properties, and nibbana. These are the 4 realities. We'll also be talking later about the dying thought process. This doesn't mean that our consciousness leaves the body at death and takes another body. It's not like that. Every consciousness just arises and passes away. But it still has kamic force, or volition, which is one kind of mental factor called satana in Pali. We'll be talking more about mental factors soon, so when we say kama we'll know exactly what it means. Kama is volition, again, one kind of mental factor. Whether it is associated with wholesome or unwholesome consciousness, we call it bad kama or good kama. If volition is connected with wholesome consciousness, we call it good kama. If it is associated with unwholesome consciousness, we call it bad kama. Volition, satana, pushes you to do something good or bad, we call this kama. So though all types of consciousness arise and disappear, they still have kamic force. They carry on as a matter of cause and effect. At death, there is the last thought moment consciousness, which we call kuti. Then we die. Then we have to take another life, padasandhi, or rebirth, relinking, consciousness arises. But it's not the same consciousness, it's a different one. If we think it's the same, that it's eternal, it is wrong view. And if we see it as a completely different one, unconnected with the previous one, this is wrong view too. There's still a connection, via cause and effect. We'll study all this in detail later. We have dying thought process, dreaming thought process, eating thought process. We have lots to learn still. But if we learn the names of the different types of consciousness now, It will help us understand later. This rootless consciousness that we've been talking about has 3 groups. If you remember one group, the second group is very easy to remember because they are very similar. For now, it's important to know that the Buddha said that when we hear or see something, etc., it's not a soul or a person or an entity. Instead, it is consciousness, just one kind of reality. There are 4 conditions needed for Panchaviññāna to arise. Pancha means 5 and Viññāna refers to eye, ear, nose, tongue, or body consciousness. Although we've been talking about the first of the 3 groups of Ahetuka Citta, called Akusala Vipaka Citta, the same 4 conditions are required for Panchaviññāna in the second group as well. Between these 2 groups, we have 2 types of eye consciousness, 2 types of ear consciousnesses, and so on. Collectively, we call these 10 types of consciousness Panchaviññāna. In English, we can call it sense impression. For any sense impression to arise, we need 4 conditions. See? Cause and effect. For Cakuviññāna, eye consciousness, to arise, we need 1. Visual organ, or eye sensitivity. If we're blind, we can't see. Or if we close our eyes, we can't see. So we need eye sensitivity. 2. Visible object. A sight, a form, a picture. Even if your eye works fine, if I'm not here in front of you, you can't see me. We need a visual object in front of us. 3. Light. Even if we're sitting very close to one another and there is eye sensitivity, if it's nighttime and there's no light, you cannot see me. Why? Because it's too dark. We need light for eye consciousness to arise. And 4. Attention, which means turning your mind to the object. If you don't turn your mind to the object, you can't see it. Even if I'm sitting here, if you're just daydreaming or doing something else, you won't see me. So we need attention too. So these 4 conditions make eye consciousness arise. There's no person and no force that makes consciousness arise. It depends on these 4 conditions. They are why eye consciousness arises. We have to understand cause and effect. In the same way, for Sotaviññāna, ear consciousness, to arise, we need 4 conditions. 1. Auditory organ, or ear sensitivity. If you're deaf, you can't hear. 2. Sound. If there's no sound, we can't hear anything. Ear consciousness cannot arise without sound. 3. Space. We need space between the sound and the auditory organ. Even if we sit closely and I'm talking, if you close your ear you can't hear me. Why? No space for the sound to travel to the auditory organ. There's a barrier. Or if you go outside and we're separated by the walls of this building, you can't hear me talking. Why? No space. We need space. This is one of the conditions. And 4. Attention. If you don't have attention, you won't hear me. If you're busy thinking or worrying about something else, you won't hear what I'm talking about. We need attention to turn our mind toward the object in order to hear what's being said. When there are these 4 kinds of conditions, ear consciousness arises. We call these 4 kinds of conditions the cause, and ear consciousness is the effect. See? Cause and effect. All day long, eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body consciousness arise. They depend on their conditions in order to do so. For Ghanaviññāna, nose consciousness, to arise, we need 1. Olfactory organ, or nose sensitivity. We need this. If you close your nose, you can't smell. 2. Odor. If there's no odor, even if you have good nose sensitivity, nose consciousness cannot arise. 3. Air. Even if you have nose sensitivity and an odor, if there's no air you can't receive the smell. The air carries the smell to your nose. If you stay in an enclosed glass room, no air can exchange to carry the smell to you. So we need air to carry the smell to our nose. Air is one kind of condition. And 4. Attention. Even if the other 3 conditions are present, if you lack attention, nose consciousness will not arise. You must have attention to notice the odor. We need these 4 conditions for nose consciousness arise. For Jivaviññāna, tongue consciousness, to arise, we need 1. Gustatory organ, or tongue sensitivity. 2. Taste. 3. Water. Even if you have good tongue sensitivity and taste, you still need water. Water here refers to saliva or another fluid. If your tongue is very dry, or you put something that is very dry on your tongue, you cannot taste it, tongue consciousness cannot arise. So we need saliva or another liquid. And 4. Attention. Even if you have tongue sensitivity, flavor and moisture, you also need attention. How many times have you been daydreaming while eating? Someone asks you if the food is sweet or sour, or whatever, and you can't answer them? We can't say because we didn't turn our mind to the object, we didn't have attention. These 4 conditions make tongue consciousness arise. For Kayaviññāna, body consciousness, to arise, we need 1. Tactile organ, or body sensitivity. This is a part of our body that is capable of feeling when it is touched. Our hair and nails are incapable of feeling touch. Why? Because they have no body sensitivity. So the tactile organ is a part of the body, such as the skin, that is capable of feeling touch. 2. Tactile, tangible, object. We need something to come and touch us. 3. Earth, i.e., the earth element, and 4. Attention. If someone holds your hand but you don't pay attention, you won't feel whether the hand is soft or hard. We need attention. If we lack one of these things here, body consciousness cannot arise. These 4 conditions are the cause or condition, and body consciousness is the result or effect. I would now like to give a simile to help you understand what eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, receiving and investigating consciousness mean. A man goes to sleep at the foot of a fruiting mango tree. As he sleeps, a ripe mango loosens from the stalk and falls to the ground, landing near his ear. He is awakened by the sound, opens his eyes, and looks at the fallen mango. He then stretches out his arm, takes the mango, and squeezes and smells it. He then eats and enjoys it, swallowing it down with his saliva. After he finishes, he goes back to sleep. In the same way, a thought process arises whenever an object is presented to one of the sense doors, e.g., when an audible object appears to the avenue of the ear sense door. A thought process will unfold for 17 thought moments, one by one. As a part of this process, we need to understand bhavanga. We'll talk about this many times to help you understand it. For the most part, when we talk about bhavanga, we're talking about when we sleep. When we sleep well, we call it bhavanga. It's one kind of consciousness. There are 19 types of bhavanga, which we'll talk about later. In English, we can translate bhavanga as life continuum. Bhavanga is the factor of life, an indispensable cause or condition of existence. Without bhavanga, we cannot exist. It is an essential condition for continuing a subjective existence. When you fall asleep, bhavanga will arise in a stream or flow. Whenever the mind does not receive a fresh external object, there is the experience of bhavanga. For example, we don't take any external object when we fall asleep. There's no sound, no form, no smell, no taste, no touching. We are asleep. At that time, we experience bhavanga. Whenever there is a vivid or very clear object, though, a thought process arises. And between any 2 thought processes, there is also bhavanga. So bhavanga is not only when we're sleeping. When we fall asleep, it's bhavanga over and over. But even between 2 thought processes, bhavanga arises. Not only that, but as we're studying Abhidhamma, perhaps you lose focus and don't hear me. This too is bhavanga. I might say, do you understand what I just explained? And you might reply, what are you talking about? So when you can't, or don't, receive an external object, bhavanga arises, especially when we fall asleep. This is very important. That's why we call it the factor, or indispensable cause or condition, of existence. If we don't have bhavanga, what happens? We die. You might sleep for many hours, and bhavanga arises one after another. A stream of bhavanga flows. But if you don't have bhavanga arise, you die right away. So let's relate different types of consciousness to the mango simile. The man falls asleep under the mango tree. This is bhavanga. Later on, an object impinged on a sense organ, as the ripe mango loosened from the stalk and fell to the ground. Some sound appeared to the avenue of the ear sense door, and then bhavanga broke, it was shaken. After the bhavanga was shaken, it was arrested by the arising of thought consciousness. The bhavanga had arisen but then disappeared. Then, there is panyukadvaravajana, sense door consciousness. Pancha means 5, Dvara means door, and avajana means adverting consciousness. So, sense door consciousness arises. This is the same as the sleeping man being awakened by the sound of the falling mango. There is panyukadvaravajana, sense door consciousness arises. After this thought consciousness arises and disappears, another one, kakuvinyana, eye consciousness, arises. This is like how the man opened his eyes and looked at the mango. Next, sampadachana, receiving consciousness, arises. Receiving consciousness is like the stretching of the man's arm as he went to look at the fruit. And then santirana, investigating consciousness, arises. He studied the fruit, squeezed it. What kind of fruit is this? After investigating consciousness arises and disappears, vadapana, determining consciousness, arises. This is like how the man in the simile determined, this seems good to eat. After this thought consciousness arises and disappears, there is jivana consciousness. Jivana means impulsion, or fully experiencing or enjoying the object. This is like the man enjoying the mango. Jivana mostly arises 7 times. After 7 Jivana thought moments arise and disappear, Tadaramana, registering or retention consciousness, arises 2 times. This is like how the man swallows the mango together with his saliva. Then, after these 17 thought moments have arisen and disappeared, there is bhavanga again. This is like the person going back to sleep. Use this helpful mango simile to try to remember the order and types of consciousness in these 17 thought moments. 1. Past bhavanga. An object is presented to the sense door. 2. Vibrating bhavanga. When an object appears, the bhavanga shakes. It arises and disappears. 3. Arrest bhavanga. This is the bhavanga that is arrested by thought consciousness. When thought consciousness arises, bhavanga disappears. So we have these 3 bhavanga. 4. Sense door consciousness, Dvaravajana. 5. Sense consciousness, Pankavinyana, which depends on the object, e.g., maybe eye consciousness, ear consciousness, etc. If it's a sound, then ear consciousness will arise. 6. Receiving consciousness, Sampadachana. Can you see how all these types of consciousness have their function? Ear consciousness hears, receiving consciousness receives but can't make a determination or enjoy an object, it just receives. 7. Investigating consciousness, Santirana. 8. Determining consciousness, Vadapana, which means that when an object appears to a sense door, the eye, the ear, etc., this consciousness determines whether it's good or not good. It makes that determination. The function of determining consciousness is to determine the object. Investigating consciousness, number 7, is like a police officer whose duty is to arrest someone who breaks the law, and determining consciousness is like the judge who decides whether the violator goes to jail. 9 to 15. Jivana arise, impulsion. We enjoy the object, fully experience the object. For these 7 thought moments, there is impulsion consciousness. To clarify, if the object is very clear and vivid, it's 7 times. However, when we dream it is just 5 times, and when we gain enlightenment, path consciousness, it is just 1 time. We'll study all of this in detail later. During the Jivana process, if the object is undesirable or unpleasant, dosa mula citta, consciousness rooted in ill will arise. Or perhaps if you're enjoying gambling, then the Jivana would be lobha mula citta. If while gambling you lost money, then dosa mula citta. See how it changes depending on the object. When you sit in meditation and feel very happy about your meditation, this is wholesome consciousness. This Jivana arises 7 times. But what if the object isn't clear? Maybe you fall asleep and are abruptly awakened by the phone ringing. There's no Jivana. Then you fall asleep again. Bhavanga. For now, though, understand that there are usually 7 Jivanas. It depends on the person and the object. 16 to 17. Tadaramana, registering or retention consciousness. This always arises 2 times. Tadaramana is like how when you eat something good and it's delicious, after you finish you think about how good it was. Or maybe you get angry about something and there is dosa mula citta, but later on you think about what happened. We call this registering consciousness, and it arises 2 times. After all 17 thought moments arise and disappear, bhavanga arises again. And then another thought process will arise. So bhavanga will arise between 2 thought processes. Depending on the object, there are typically 17 thought moments in a thought process. Sometimes, though, there may not be a registering consciousness or any jivana. Kusala vipaka citta. We will now continue learning about Ahetuka citta. We've only studied the first group so far. The second group is rootless wholesome resultant consciousness, or Ahetuka kusala vipaka citta. After you remember and understand the first group, unwholesome resultant consciousness, you will understand rootless wholesome resultant consciousness, of which there are 8 types, and only one that is markedly different from the first group. 1. Upeka sahagata kakuvinyana, or eye consciousness accompanied by indifference. 2. Upeka sahagata sotavinyana, or ear consciousness accompanied by indifference. 3. Upeka sahagata ganavinyana, or nose consciousness accompanied by indifference. 4. Upeka sahagata jivavinyana, or tongue consciousness accompanied by indifference. 5. Sukha sahagata kayavinyana, or body consciousness accompanied by pleasure. Sukha refers to physical happiness, happiness in your body. When you sit or sleep somewhere that is very soft, your body feels happy and pleasant. This is physical happiness. At that moment, this type of body consciousness arises. 6. Upeka Sahagata Sampadachana, or receiving consciousness accompanied by indifference. 7. Somanasa Sahagata Santirana, or investigating consciousness accompanied by pleasure. 8. Upeka Sahagata Santirana, or investigating consciousness accompanied by indifference. We call these 8 types rootless wholesome resultant consciousness. There is no root, no lobha, attachment, no dosa, ill will, and no moha, delusion, associated with this consciousness. This wholesome resultant consciousness is the result of wholesome consciousness in a previous life. So, now, in this life, we experience desirable objects, things we like. If you see something desirable, for example, it's the result of wholesome consciousness. Just cause and effect, right? Some people are very lucky, they just see and hear good things, enjoy good smells and good tastes, and even their body, there's no pain, they don't have to see the doctor much, they have no accidents and no operations. Why? These are the results of previous good karma. Due to their good karma, their wholesome consciousness, in a past life, this present life has these results: no pain, no hurting in the body, just physical happiness. Everything has a cause or condition. You don't have to blame anyone for your unpleasant experiences in life. As for number 7 and number 8 here, we have 2 types of investigating consciousness, right? One is accompanied by pleasure and the other is accompanied by indifference. Why are there 2? If there is a special or very desirable object, Somanasa Sahagata Santirana will arise. This is investigating consciousness accompanied by pleasure. If it's just a normal, ordinary desirable object, Upeka Sahagata Santirana will arise. This is investigating consciousness accompanied by indifference. Do you understand the difference? It depends on the object. I would also like you to note that between these first 2 groups of Ahetuka Citta, we have 2 types of eye consciousness, 2 types of ear consciousness, 2 types of nose consciousness, 2 types of tongue consciousness, and 2 types of body consciousness. These 10 types of consciousness, or these 5 pairs of consciousness, are sometimes collectively referred to as Dvipankavinyana. DVI means both. We don't have to call it eye consciousness, ear consciousness, and so on when we're talking about this collective group. Instead, we can just call it Dvipankavinyana. In English, we call them the 5 sense impressions. Kiriya Citta. Now we go to rootless functional consciousness, or Ahetuka Kiriya Citta. There are 3 of these. 1. Upeka Sahagata Panyukadvaravajana, or 5 sense door adverting consciousness accompanied by indifference. We can also call this 5 sense door cognition, or apprehending, turning or reflecting, consciousness. These various translations of the Pali mean the same thing. They refer to turning toward an object. 2. Upeka Sahagata Manadvaravajana, or mind door adverting consciousness accompanied by indifference. Mano means mind. We recently talked about Vadapana, or determining consciousness, which has to do with the 5 sense doors. But here, if the object is a mind object, then it's Manadvaravajana. It functions the same, but Manadvaravajana has 2 functions, Panyukadvaravajana and Manadvaravajana Citta. These 2 types of consciousness are functional consciousness, right? In all, there are 20 types of functional consciousness. These 20 belong to arahants, not us. But for all beings, arahant or non-arahant, there are these 2 types of functional consciousness. They can arise for arahants and non-arahants. Later on, we'll be talking much more about the various types of consciousness. Even though we have 89 types of consciousness, why are there also 121 types of consciousness? For regular people, we have about 45. It depends on the person. We can't get them all. If we gain jhana, more types of consciousness can arise. If we attain nibbana, path or fruit, supramundane consciousness, even more types of consciousness can arise. But if you are just an ordinary person and don't attain anything, about 45 types can arise. As we continue to study this, we will eventually understand exactly how many types of consciousness can arise for different beings. Like an animal, for instance, how many types of consciousness can arise? We'll understand the different types that can arise for animals, regular human beings, Sotapanna, Sakadagami, never returners, and arahants. We'll know exactly how many types of consciousness they can experience. It also depends on a being's plane of existence, sensual sphere, form sphere, or formless sphere. The types of consciousness for arahants may vary too. We have many things to learn here. 3. Somanasa Sahagata Hasatupada, or smile-producing consciousness accompanied by pleasure. This type of consciousness is functional consciousness belonging only to arahants. When ordinary people smile, any one of 8 types of consciousness may arise. For Sotapanna, Sakadagami and Anagami, there are 6 types. For arahants and Buddhas, there are 5 types. Also, there are 6 classes of smiling or laughter. 1. A smile manifesting itself in expression and countenance. This means that when we smile, our mouth doesn't show our teeth. The mouth moves just a little. Our eyes may also get a bit more wide than usual. So there's just a little expression in the smile. 2. A smile consisting in the slight movement of the lips just enough to reveal the tips of the teeth. Here, the smile just barely shows the teeth and there's no sound emitted. 3. Laughter giving out a light sound. 4. Laughter accompanied by the movement of the head, shoulders and arms. With the 4th class, you feel very happy, right? So you move these parts of your body as you laugh. 5. Laughter accompanied by the shedding of tears. Here, you feel very, very happy, right? 6. An outburst of laughter accompanied by the forward and backward movement of the entire body from the head to the feet. Most of us have experienced all 6 of these classes of smiling or laughter, right? When we see someone smiling or laughing, we can guess the type of person they are, cultured or rich, average, or lower class. The commentary explains that the Buddha could indulge in only number 1 and number 2. How about us? All of them? For the most part, someone indulging in number 1 and number 2 could be called a cultured person. Someone indulging in number 3 and number 4 could be called an average person, and someone indulging in number 5 and number 6 could be called a lower class person. An outbreak of laughter in the class. What number are you right now? Number 4, right? As we laugh, we shake our shoulders, arms and head. This movement is number 4. We're not shedding tears, right? This doesn't mean that we are lower class beings whenever we laugh number 5 and number 6. It's not meant like that. But in general, you can guess the type of person, including yourself, by the type of smile or laughter. So now we know the 6 classes of laughter. Now, we have to know about consciousness. What type of consciousness are you experiencing right now? If we study Abhidhamma, we will know right away what type of consciousness has arisen in our mind whenever we smile or laugh. It depends on the object or reason. If we hit the jackpot, we're very happy and smile, right? Is it wholesome or unwholesome? It's unwholesome, right? In both unwholesome and wholesome consciousness, there can be somanassa, or a pleasurable feeling. So the consciousness depends on the object, the reason, the cause. For ordinary worldlings, puthujjana, those who have not yet attained enlightenment, we will smile or laugh with 8 types of consciousness. In unwholesome consciousness, how many are somanassa? Lobha Mula Citta has 4, right? These 4 kinds of consciousness are rooted in attachment. Also, in wholesome consciousness, which we'll study soon, we have 4 types of somanassa. So, altogether, 8 types of consciousness can arise for puthujjana. If the object is a sensual object, it's unwholesome consciousness. If the object is generosity, morality, concentration, meditation, or other wholesome things, and you feel happy and smile or laugh, it's wholesome consciousness. So for puthujjana, there are 8 types, which depend on the object. Sotapanna, Sakadagami and Anagami may smile or laugh with just 6 types of consciousness. Why is it different than for ordinary worldlings? Because enlightened beings have already eradicated ditthagata sampayutta, or consciousness connected with wrong view. They don't have wrong view, right? They've eradicated the 2 types of consciousness connected with wrong view. For the Buddha, arahants and silent Buddhas, or Pacceka Buddhas, there are only 5 types of consciousness when they smile. 4 types of somanassa in functional sense sphere consciousness, and hasatupada, smile-producing functional consciousness. We'll be talking about functional sense sphere consciousness later. I mentioned earlier that there are 5 kinds of feeling: pleasure, displeasure, indifferent, or neutral, painful, and physical happiness. The first 3, somanassa, domanassa, and upekkha, are purely mental. They do not need a sense object. So if you think about something and feel pleasure, displeasure or indifferent, it is purely mental. On the other hand, sukha and dukkha are purely physical. Dependent upon the body, we have painful feelings or happiness in the body. We'll be talking more about these later. For next week, it would be good if you review the 30 types of consciousness we've studied thus far. We have learned about the 12 types of unwholesome consciousness and the 18 types of rootless consciousness. Starting next week, we'll be talking about the 24 types of Kamavacara Sobhana Citta. If we understand unwholesome consciousness, we will understand these 24 types of consciousness too. For now, I'll just introduce the names of the first 8 that we'll be studying next week. 1. Somanasa Sahagata Jnana Sampayuta Asankarika. In unwholesome consciousness rooted in attachment, we had Ditthagata Sampayuta, right? Here, we just changed Ditti to Jnana. Everything else is the same. 2. Somanasa Sahagata Jnana Sampayuta Sasankarika. 3. Somanasa Sahagata Jnana Vipayuta Asankarika. 4. Somanasa Sahagata Jnana Vipayuta Sasankarika. 5. Upeka Sahagata Jnana Sampayuta Asankarika. 6. Upeka Sahagata Jnana Sampayuta Sasankarika. 7. Upeka Sahagata Jnana Vipayuta Asankarika. 8. Upeka Sahagata Jnana Vipayuta Sasankarika.